Hello, welcome to the Elevate Your Wellbeing podcast. We are on episode 41 and welcome to September. I'm sitting here and it is a glorious, glorious afternoon, and I'm really hoping that we have some glorious weather here in the UK during September. And I hope you are wherever you are listening, or maybe you're ready for the cozier, cooler months. But I want to dive into a very reflective episode today. I've mentioned this on at least one of my previous episodes that came out in the last few weeks, that I would be meeting a mentor of mine in person. Now, as I record this, I met my mentor just over a week ago for the very first time in person. I've been mentored by this person for about 3.5 years. This person has been a very, very strong guiding source of help and stability, even without them really realizing it, through a lot. So it was a huge moment to meet them in person. And I'm going over notes because it wasn't just a case of meeting them. I also then went to an event where they were the keynote speaker, and it was an incredible, incredible event. So before I dive into that, do make sure you have a journal and pen. There might be some things that come up for you that you might be intrigued about and want to make notes on, or you might enjoy going through the journal prompts that I'm going to give you at the end. Make sure you have some water. Make sure you're getting into some natural light. Maybe you're listening to this in the car, or you're listening to this whilst you're out for a walk or run, or you're sitting down as this episode airs and you're just enjoying going through some reflection with me. So maybe you have someone you have been mentored by, and they might not even know it. So a mentor, what is a mentor? Who is a mentor? A mentor is either, it could be something, you could call them a mentor, or you could call them a coach. And it's basically someone who is a lighthouse, like guiding light, a role model, someone who could support and guide you. They've probably been someone that has gone through a similar journey to you, and they're just a few steps ahead. They know the road that you're about to walk on. They know that path you're about to take, and they can help give you that guiding light, because when you're in the thick of it, when you're in that storm, as it were, it can be really challenging to know, is this, the dark night of the soul sort of thing, is this ever going to end? Which direction do I take? What's actually going to work? And I've had quite a few of these people in my life where, I can remember someone very clearly, her saying, I've done all the things you don't need to do, because I've had the failures, I've done the experience, I've had the failures, and then I can guide you with what does work. And when I was being guided by this person, it did work for what I was building at that time in my business. So this is the power of getting around people who can support you like that. But it may not be direct. You could see that mentorship or coaching right as you're doing right now. You're listening to this podcast and being guided by me. You might be listening to someone else's podcast. You might be reading their book. You might be reading their blog. You might be reading a post that they put up on social media. Or you might be going to that next level and having that one-on-one session with them, or a group coaching session. So you get to learn from them in deeper ways. And that could be for free in a Facebook group, something I do, something a lot of the people I've been mentored by or coached by have offered, and some still do. And then you have the next level to that, which is you go into those paid coaching sessions or paid mentorship. But this is the opportunity where you get to really hone in and get to ask questions and get proper and deep clarity. And that was the key thing. So when I went up to London and met my mentor, there was the opportunity to have a very unique opportunity to meet them over brunch. Now, this was a really small group, which was 30 people. some of you might be listening to this and thinking 30 is a lot, but considering for the later, like the main event where he was the keynote speaker, there was nearly 300 people. So considering it was like 10%, of the main amount of people that were there, it was huge. And we literally masterminded for like 2 hours around this beautiful table in a private like banquet room overlooking the Thames. It was really beautiful and just an incredible moment to not only have the opportunity to ask questions, but be around people that are further ahead than I am in my business and really get to understand the type of questions they want to ask. Because that's one thing that I've noticed in myself, that I can be around these people where I can learn from them, but then I almost get not quite starstruck, but I overthink what I should ask them. And then there are times when I don't ask questions, or I don't necessarily ask the right questions. Now, what I love about this particular mentor is he can hear what you ask, and then he reframes it to really understand what you're trying to ask. Because sometimes it can be really challenging. You're like, I know this is the issue I'm going through, or this is the challenge I'm going through. And we see it at the surface level, whereas he's able to dive in deep and really get to the nitty gritty. So that is one skill I really look up to in him. And then I really bring that into how I coach my clients, because it's like, so we're peeling back the layers and really getting deep into what it is that you're stumped against, or what you're bumping up against that's potentially stopping that forward momentum, which is really interesting. But it was, for me, it was fascinating listening to the questions that were being asked and actually going, that's something I relate to as well. Oh, that's something I've also noticed in my business. And it was that reminder of there is no behind, because it's really easy to look at people who from the outside look as though they're miles ahead of you. So if you're looking at people that, let's wind all the way back to leaving college, and all your friends have boyfriends, they're in committed relationships, but you don't have anyone. So you're like, they're further ahead than me because they're going to get married and then have the children and get the house, etc. So we put all these things, these labels, these expectations on ourselves and assume that we're behind. And we can do that in our businesses or even in our careers as well. So if you're not a business owner, you might think, oh, this doesn't relate to me, but it does, because you might do this in your career or in your personal life, or even in your self-care. Like I noticed this in the yoga space as well. Like people will literally sit on their yoga mats and they look around the room and they compare. And they'll be like, oh, that person can do that pose better than I can. That person can hold that pose for longer than I can. They are obviously further ahead than I am. We acknowledge the further ahead, but we don't acknowledge the path, the journey that they're on. How long have they been on this journey compared to you? And if you're going to do any comparison, that would be where I'd ask you to question the comparison. Like, how far along are they? Or how far along are you in that journey? So if you were reading a book and then your friend's like, oh, I'm reading that same book, how far along are you? And you're like, oh, I'm on page 100 and whatever, I'm on chapter 10, and I'm literally like 2 pages in. You can't share too much of the story because you're so much further ahead. You can easily compare. But then when we track back and go, oh, actually, you're so far ahead in life, you've got all these achievements and blah, 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 it literally is a blah, 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 because it doesn't matter, because there's no such thing as ahead. It's the focus on what you're doing. How does it make you feel? And that was the key thing for me, coming back to meeting this person who's been an incredible role model in my personal life as well as my business, because he has that holistic look of, I don't want you just to be successful in your business. I want you to be able to enjoy life now as well, and look after your mind and look after your body and be present with the people that you love, which is really beautiful. It's not all or nothing mentality going into your business. and I've got completely distracted by what was going on outside, and I can't remember my train of thought. So I'm going to come back to that. Okay, I think I remember where I was going with this. It's how it makes you feel. So it's not how life looks like on the outside. It is how life makes you feel on the inside. So if you're looking outside at other people and you're comparing where they're at in their journey compared to yours, then you're always going to be left kind of wanting, or you then feel superior because you're like, oh, I'm further ahead. But it's how it makes you feel. And this was the key thing for me. Yes, I remember where I was going with this. On the drive up there, even the day before, but on the drive up there, I can remember feeling I shouldn't be in this room with these people. They're so much further ahead than I am. They're at these particular levels in their business. Who am I to be in this room? And I'm in the business as well, so I deserve to be in this room just as much as they do. And by hearing the questions they were asking, it made me realize that I'm actually further along than I believed I was, comparing my journey with my journey. And that was the eye-opening point for me. It wasn't just meeting this person, it was being in this room with all these other people that initially seemed like they were so much further along than I am in my business. But actually, I have the same feelings and I have the same doubts and I have the same dreams as they do, as what they're wanting to create. And that for me was really, really beautiful. And I'm just having a little look through my notes now because there were so many takeaways. And this comes back to, just going to have a quick look because I want to reference this. So you might have listened to this episode already if you have been listening to my podcast for a while now. But my episode back on the 21st, it was first aired on the 21st of July this year, 2023, episode 34, which is Proximity is Power. Get in rooms where everyone is smarter than you are so you can learn from them. And it really is true. And I'm going to be talking about that event again next week, on next week's episode. I literally just sat down before I started recording this episode. I was like, right, what do I want to talk about for the next 4 episodes? And it's just boom, all come out. So I'm like, I'm really excited to sit down and chat with these. But this is exactly what it was all about. That episode 34 was about proximity is power. It was going to an event and being around like-minded people and learning from other people. And that was the beauty of going to this event last week. As I record this, it was last week. I'm being around people that, again, wasn't the smartest person necessarily in the room because I want to learn from other people. This was the key thing when I was a kid, because it's like I felt like I should have been the smartest person in the room, because if I didn't know the answer, then I was stupid. And I hung on that. It was that comparison of people in the room are smarter than me, and then they think I'm stupid. So I was letting judgment come in. Whereas there were no stupid questions in the room. It was literally like, this is how I feel right now. And it's acknowledging that person for where they're at, and then going around the room going, actually, I've experienced something similar. And that proximity is power, getting close to people who are where you want to be or who are achieving what you want to achieve, and learn from them so you can literally get the shortcut, or which bridge to cross is going to be the most optimal one for you. And that was really key from meeting this person. And it was amazing just being able to be in the room with them and then continue to learn from them. So there were stories that I've heard him talk about before, clearly, because we've all got very similar stories that we focus on, that were these massive pivotal points for us on our journeys. So he's going to repeat them over and over and over again. But what I love is he's also the person that taught me it's more powerful to read the same book 100 times than it is to read 100 books in a year. It's more powerful to read the same book 100 times than it is to read 100 books in 1 year. Because if you keep rereading, or you keep re-watching a training, or you keep re-listening to one particular podcast episode, for example, there's always going to be something that you didn't quite hear, because our brains can't take in every little thing and remember every little thing. Or there's things that we've gone through that we actually go, I didn't realize that before. And we can look back and compare our own journeys. So the weekend before this particular event where I met my mentor, I was at another event that was, again, mind-blowing. There were so many takeaways that I had from that. And again, being around other people that are in a similar business to me and learning that there are multiple ways to get there, multiple paths that are all going to the same destination, like with a lot of things in life. And one of them, he was like, I'm sure you're reading all the books, you're reading, all the books on marketing and copywriting and personal development and um, personal growth and sort of learning about mindset. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I've been going really, deep into those subjects and like plowing through it to get ahead. And he was like, don't forget to read fiction. Don't forget to read fiction. And considering this was a business event, this was my biggest takeaway from this as well. And I wanted to mention this because it's related to the event where I met my mentor the following weekend after this event. He was like, don't forget to read fiction. It's like having that downtime because you can just casually read things. So I was like, all right, I'm going to put up a post on social media and just say, look, this is the challenge I've been set by someone who's high up in the business that I'm in. He's at a position where I see myself getting to. And he said, make sure you read fiction. And I don't think I've read, no, I don't think I know. I have not read any fiction book up until this point when I was in this room with him and he's saying to like 60 of us, make sure you read fiction. If you haven't been doing that, do prioritize it. And I've heard it from another mentor recently. She was like, I'm pretty sure she said she reads a business related book, a learning book in the morning, and then her wind down, her evening routine is the fiction book. And I was like, okay, let's get back into that because I have so many fiction books and I would devour books like that really easily. So I put up a post on social media going, right, I would like to know what everyone's reading. And I specifically said, this is a challenge I've been set by a mentor in my business to read fiction books. Give me your recommendations. And so many people were like, oh, I'll read this. I was like, I've already read that. It's a business book. I'm asking specifically for fiction. Or some people were like, would suggest biographies. And I was like, I don't need to learn someone's life story. I want fiction. I want something that's completely fantasy. And I was going through some of these lists and I was like, okay, let me go and have a look at these books. And I'm not going to necessarily read anything just because it's recommended, but it's interesting to look at and then see what else the recommendations come up, for example, like on Amazon. And then I just had a little search through my bookshelf and I was like, okay, let's see what jumps out. So I pulled out 3 books that I've read countless times, literally going back to when I was in like secondary school, like high school. And I was like, okay, let's read them because let's see where I've come to in my journey since I've read these books. And there's so many things in there that are limiting beliefs and all these things. And it's like, I wonder whether that's had an impact on me because I've read it in a book so young. Like these are books that I was reading like at the age of 14. So you might be like, okay, you're 14, you're reading a book that was written for 14-year-olds. But it was really fascinating to read through them and then reflect on where I am now. I can see them for what they are. And I was like, okay, that's a limiting belief. And I can notice it and recognize it. And that's not who I am anymore. So that was also really, really fascinating to see that particular journey there. So it's interesting to get in rooms with people who learn from them and hear their stories and be reminded because we know what we should be doing most of the time. I'm sure you listening to this, something you should be doing that's going to be helping with your mental health or your physical health, your general well-being, something that might even improve your productivity at work or in your business. But sometimes we need those reminders and just do it, just get on with it. And yes, a lot. We just quickly scanning through my notes. It's like stop focusing on the behind, get rid of the should, shed the should, and that's been something I remember saying to people in yoga classes. Like we say we should do this, And it's like letting the shoulds go, because we're putting that judgment, that pressure on ourselves. Only you are doing that on you. And it's, yeah, it was just getting in rooms with other people. And it's that acknowledging that actually it was really nice, because I've been in lots of rooms with people I've looked up with lots of times. I'm very fortunate that I have met people that I could have easily put up on a pedestal. And there are some people that I have, and it's really interesting to meet them. For me, the experience has been, they're just normal people like you and I. And they've been really, 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 really down to earth and very grounding for me to meet. And I think that's also a really beautiful thing as well. It's that reminder that we're all human, we're all going through our own journeys, and it's just a privilege to have that as well. Because when you do work with people online, there can be that disconnect. So I just thought that was really beautiful to, again, just literally be able to like shake their hand and get a photo with them, and just, yeah, just say thank you to this person. And, I didn't have to go into it. I didn't have to explain anything about how this person has been a support, a role model for me. But just knowing that I can acknowledge and honor that in my journey is just huge. So I want to try and keep these episodes short and sweet. So I just want to share that with, I said about meeting my mentor, and I've kind of mentioned a couple of others in this episode, because it's amazing how many, it's looking back and seeing, like, I've always looked up to a lot of people, going, they're where I want to be, they're doing what I want to do, how can I learn from them? So my journal prompt for you is actually two today, is who do you have in your life that you already look up to? So who is your lighthouse? Who is that role model? And then the second prompt is, who could you go to that's where you want to be, whether that's in your career, in your business, in your health, in your well-being, in your relationships, who from the outside looking in looks as though they have the life that you desire, that you dream about, and what can you learn from them? And like I said earlier on, you don't have to physically work with them one-on-one. You don't have to necessarily meet with them in person. You could work with them easily online, whether that's in a paid mentorship, whether that's in a free Facebook group that they do, whether like what you're doing now, listening to a podcast, whether you're reading a book of theirs, or even a free blog post that they've written. Is get yourself in those rooms around people who can support you. So who is a role model? Who's been a role model for you? And I want you just to think about that person. And it might be someone that you have in your life now. It might be someone who's been in your life previously. It might have been someone who you was a role model as you were growing up. Just have that moment of gratitude for them. And then ask yourself, like, who do I want to be? Where do I want to be in life? And it could be in all of those directions, business, career, self-care, well-being, relationships, friendships, whatever it is. Or if there's one particular area that you feel you would really like to improve, and who around you already has that, and how can you look up to them to be that role model and that guiding light? And it's not a case of necessarily saying, right, this is where I'm at and this is the steps to work for me, so it will work for you. But it's just having a rough idea of a blueprint of what are they doing that I'm not doing that could enable me to have that in my life. And we're going to go into this a little bit more at the end of the month. The last episode that will be coming out at the end of September, as we go into our next 90-day review and 90-day plan, as we start to wrap up the last quarter of the year. But yeah, really, really sit with that. Who can give you that support? Who can help be that guiding light for you in your life? And who has already been that for you? And just really honor and have that gratitude for them. If they're still in your life, reach out to them and say thank you. If they're no longer with you, whether physically or just they're not in your life anymore for whatever reason, still give thanks for them, because some people are here for a short amount of time, whether that's, in that circle, or whether they sort of pass into the realm, whatever it is that you believe when people do pass away. But yeah, it's a beauty to honor and acknowledge that person. And if there's someone that you're looking up to, see what you can do to get in a room with them. How can you meet that person? How can you ask that person a question? Or how can you get in a room with that person that's with other people, and then learn from those people, like, how can I learn and grow by what sort of questions they're asking that person as well.